Hi there, this is Love Johar. Thank you so much for watching this channel and thank you so much for watching this video. A very important video for all of you out there who are trying to understand about privacy assessment, how to perform privacy assessment and privacy impact assessment and privacy risk assessment. All three topics will be covered in this video because one of my very close friends has asked me today how to perform the privacy assessment. So I just wanted to create a quick video that would help him along with all the others who are searching for the same topic out there. So in case if you like the video, feel free to share and subscribe to the channel. Thank you. So first of all, privacy assessment. Okay, performing a privacy assessment and privacy risk assessment for the first time, because if you are not aware how to do that, then you need to understand this very clearly. Okay, because here, what is privacy assessment? Privacy assessment is related with the personal information. Okay, how privacy the personal information is being handled in the organization. Okay, what are the measures in place, what are the controls that you have on the personal information, all that comes under privacy. Okay, so when we talk about privacy, you should understand we are talking about personal information. Okay, what all personal information we will discuss in this video along with examples as well, because I think many of you have mentioned that I do not give examples. So here I have clearly stated all the examples for you so that it makes more sense. Okay, so first of all, you have to define the scope. As always, you need to identify what all systems that you have, what all applications, what all databases, what all infrastructure that you have, which is actually processing the personal data. Okay, you have to identify those systems. That is number one. Second thing is what all processes that you have. Okay, what all processes that you have in place. For example, you might have processes like your attendance systems, your salary inputs, your salary systems, or maybe biometrics, different sort of processes which you have, which will actually include all the personal data of your employees and many other processes as well. So I'm just giving you examples. And along with that, areas within your organization that involve the collection, processing and storage of this personal information, because as I mentioned, there would be many sort of entry points for the data collection. How you are collecting the personal information, are you sending out forms to your employees to connect the personal information, or are you dealing with customer data, are you storing customer information, personal information of your clients, how you are doing that. So you have to understand you know what all collection is happening, how the data is being processed and stored. Where are you storing? Are you storing in house? Are you storing in the cloud? Where are you storing this information? Okay, you have to understand all this and then define the scope. For example, there might be many different processes in your organization, but not all of the processes would be dealing with the personal data. So you have to somehow understand and only define the scope here for the systems, processes and areas which are only dealing with personal data. This bit is very important, so make sure you understand this properly. You do not have to do this privacy assessment for the entire company. Okay, just make sure you understand this part very carefully. You have to do this only where personal data is involved. Okay, we will come to that, what sort of personal data is there. For example, we have seen customer databases, client information, client contact details, client addresses, employee records, employee details, and any other sort of personal data repositories that you have in your organization. Okay, so then you have to define the scope only around those systems. Okay, hope that makes sense. Second thing is you have to understand and then accordingly comply with the relevant privacy laws and regulations that are applicable where your organization is residing or where your personal data is operating. Okay, so understand it properly. And depending upon that jurisdiction under which your organization and your data processing is falling, and as well as the industry, you have to follow certain legal compliance as well. These are some of the reasons why someone would perform privacy assessment in the first place. Then very important bit after that is data mapping, because you have to understand, as I mentioned in the first bit itself, that you have to understand how personal information is flowing through your organization. Okay, as I said, not all the infrastructure, servers, databases and applications would be dealing with personal data. So here you have to understand the data flow. You have to understand which devices, infrastructure devices, which equipment, what all are being used for the personal data. Here you have to identify them, create a list of that. Okay, along with where it is processed, stored and transmitted, how it is transmitted. You have to create one sort of small diagram for data flow, so that you understand this properly. Okay, and this could include from the initial stage where the data is being received or being generated or being collected, or to the time where the data is no longer in use and is being purged. Okay, is being deleted. So you have to make sure you create the entire data flow in the data mapping. Now here, after that, you have to perform a policy and procedure review. Okay, you have to understand whether you have any existing privacy policies or not. If not, you have to create them, because if you are again following part of the compliance, then you have to create policies and procedures. You have to do that and make sure that they are clear. Okay, and you have to review your organization's data retention policy as well, and you have to make sure that it complies with the applicable regulations as far as the data retention is also concerned. So you have to review the policies as well. If you have them, then review them. If you do not have them, then create them. Okay, after that, you have consent mechanisms. So consent mechanisms is very important in case of privacy assessment, because you here actually you review how the consent is obtained and managed, because again we are talking about personal data. So you have to ensure that individuals are informed about the purpose of data collection, why you are collecting the data, and have the option to opt out if they want to. Okay, consider examples such as consent checkboxes on the web forms or privacy settings in user accounts where people have clear indications to do so. Okay, so after that, you have to understand some security measures. You have to understand and assess the effectiveness of security measures in place. You might have to encrypt the data, which is personal data that you have, and you might have to include access controls to make sure only authorized users have access to that personal information, as well as performing regular security audits to that personal data is very important. After that, you do the vendor assessment. If your organization shares any sort of personal data with third party vendors, and then you have to understand their privacy and their security practices as well, so that in case of any breach on their part, again you would be getting involved into that. So you have to make sure that you have all the contracts which are in place, and you have specific data protection clauses in your contracts, especially with the cloud service providers. Okay, after that, training and awareness is important, because here you have to inform your employees about this new method, new process of securing the personal data. What are the procedures that you have in place? So that's why you have to make sure that your employees are aware. So you provide privacy training for all the employees. This could cover topics like recognizing phishing attempts, safeguarding physical documents, and understanding the importance of data protection. Here we are talking about personal data only, so make sure you keep it relevant to that. Okay, after that, you perform incident response planning. Let's say you get any privacy breaches. How will you deal with them? How will you deal with the privacy breaches? You have to make sure that you have incident response planning ready for that. and you have to ensure that the plan includes communication strategies as well as the legal obligations for reporting those incidents, because they vary from you know compliance to compliance. Then you have documentation and record keeping. You have to maintain thorough documentation of the privacy assessment process, including policies, procedures, and risk assessment. So you have to make sure that you keep the records of the consent forms that you have received from the individuals whose personal data you are processing, as well as you have data processing agreements in place with the vendors, and incident response documentation as well for responding to the incidents that we have just discussed. I hope this makes sense so far. In case of any privacy assessment, what needs to be done. Now coming to the privacy risk assessment. So here, almost similar to what we have discussed already, somehow different in certain aspects. So let us quickly understand privacy risk assessment as well. So here you identify threats and vulnerabilities. What threats and vulnerabilities? These are the potential threats and vulnerabilities which are again related to the processing, storage of your personal information, the personal data that your organization is processing or storing. Okay, again, talking about access controls, you have to make sure that there is no unauthorized access or any insider threats which could harm the personal information, and insecure third party integrations. If there are, then of course you have to make a note of that. Then understanding the impact and likelihood, again, as we always do in the risk assessment, you know evaluate the impact of the identified risks on the individuals and the organization whose personal data you are processing. Okay, and you have to understand what will happen if a data breach happens, and what all financial losses, reputational damage, and legal consequences may take place if that happens, and accordingly assess the likelihood of each risk occurring based on the historical data if you have, and the current security controls that you have in place. Then, as we always do in the case of risk assessment as well, you prioritize the risk based on your severity and likelihood, based on your assessment, and then you focus on addressing the high priority risk first. Okay, because you might not have protection on or encryption on sensitive customer data, so that is a high risk. So you have to make sure you have proper encryption for sensitive customer data. Okay, then you review the existing controls. You evaluate the effectiveness of existing controls in mitigating identified risks, whether they are effective or not, whether you have to add on any compensating controls to them, or add on any more controls to them. You have to review them. And again, very important, access control mechanisms, encryption protocols, and monitoring systems. These are very important three that you have to have in place, okay, in terms of existing controls, especially for personal data. Implementing additional controls, as I said, if they are not proper, the existing controls are not proper, you have to implement additional controls. So based on the risk assessment, you have to implement additional controls or enhance the existing ones with the compensating controls. For example, if the risk assessment reveals vulnerabilities in a web application, so implementing a web application firewall as an additional control if specifically this web application is dealing with the personal data in this case, because here we are talking about personal data. Hope it makes sense. Then, as always, rest of the procedures are very simple. Continuous monitoring, as we always do. So it's very important. You have to make sure that in case of any changes in the technology stack that you have in your business processes, or in case of any other major changes, you continuously monitor and update your risk assessment, your risk registers accordingly. And of course, communicating of the risks with the relevant stakeholders is important, goes without saying. A legal consultation also is important in this case, because sometimes we are not sure about certain legalities, as we are dealing with personal data. So of course, sometimes we need to get in touch with legal professionals as well, if we are not sure about anything. So that is also important. After that, we have testing and simulation. Here you actually try to conduct penetration testing within your organization. You try to validate whatever security controls that you have, whatever what protection controls that you have in order to mitigate any sort of security breaches, whether they are in place or not, whether they are effective or not. So that's why you try to test and simulate all these activities, and this is again a part of the process. After that, documentation and reporting is again a similar one. You have to make sure you document all the results for the risks that you are mitigating, and any residual risk, and follow up as a continual practice. So I hope in a brief summary this makes sense to all of you who have never performed this sort of assessment before. Again, if anybody has any questions in what we have discussed here, feel free to ask me in the comment section. I will be more than happy to respond back to you. Thank you so much for watching. Take care. Bye bye.